Omni-Man versus Conquest. Let's talk about it. 1-on-1, just hands, no assistance. Who wins out of these two? When it comes to trying to power scale characters in the Invincible universe, these two are probably the most difficult to scale to one another. Just a warning here, guys, I will be going into comic spoilers. You have been warned. So one of the most difficult things when it comes to trying to scale Conquest to Omni-Man is that they only actually fight for like 5 minutes. During the Viltrumite war, there is a page where Omni-Man attacks Conquest over here. There's the image right there. However, immediately in the panel after, as you can see below, Conquest has turned the fight around and has managed to grab Nolan by the face. He then proceeds to give him the old Viltrumite headbutt that they all love to do. This is literally the only physical altercation that they get into. So the only way that we can scale them is by using a character that they've both fought. That's where our boy Mark comes in. So if we go back to this panel over here, Conquest grabs Nolan by the face and says, "Nolan, the traitor, I can't believe my luck, I get to kill you too. What have I done to deserve such fortune? Your son is so powerful, almost stronger than you. You must be so proud." And this kind of gives us the idea that he's looking down on Nolan. And just before this, Nolan had the advantage and he managed to turn it around within what looked like a minute. We also know that Conquest is probably more experienced than Nolan, and we know that Viltrumite's experience is a key factor to their strength. Also, the look of fear in Nolan's eyes is nothing like I've seen before. Well, prior to this anyway. So going back to Mark, we know that if Eve hadn't turned Conquest into this, Mark would not have had the chance to bash his head in. Before that, Mark had literally no advantage in the fight. And this is where the main issue comes in with a character like Conquest. He is so ridiculously hard to scale because he messes around with his opponents. He's someone that enjoys the fight. If you've seen Vinland Saga, his style of fighting compared to Nolan's, he's a lot like Thorkel, where Nolan is a lot like Thor's. He's in it for the thrill of the chase. Do you know what I mean? And because of that, he sometimes makes very bad decisions. So massive spoiler alert. Mark ends up killing Conquest a few pages after Conquest had that fight with Nolan. As mentioned before, Conquest ends up just toying with Mark and then going after Oliver just to torture Mark. This activates Mark's emotions. Mark chases Conquest to this planet. Conquest goes there and gets the air knocked out of him. And because of that, Mark uses that to his advantage and chokes him out. However, in the process, and I'm not going to show it here, Mark gets completely gutted. His entrails were hanging out. So he was basically ready to die. If he wasn't rescued, he would have died with Conquest. So here's the issue when it comes to scaling these guys. I want to say these guys, I mean Mark, Conquest, Omni-Man, they are all at a level of strength which is quite close to each other in the sense of they could all potentially kill one another depending on the circumstances. If the circumstances work for one of the characters, they can end up killing the other one. And in this case, the circumstances worked for Mark. It's in a similar way to where a lot of people were saying, for example, oh, if Mark was so much weaker than Conquest, how did he manage to bash in Conquest's head with his own head? Well, the thing is, Mark is weaker than Conquest, but he's not that much weaker to a level where his skull is not going to damage Conquest. His skull is going to cause damage to Conquest. And this is where we come into the theory of the adrenal gland. One of the most popular theories in the community is that Mark's advantage over a lot of Viltrumites is that he has the human adrenaline, whereas Viltrumites lack an adrenal gland. Therefore, they are not able to produce adrenaline when they get angry, excited, scared, for example, and they're not able to basically up their performance when their emotions rise. This is not proven by any means at all, but it's a very valid theory because every time Mark seems to get emotionally damaged or pushed to the edge, this is where we see Mark at his best, at his strongest. But again, this doesn't take away from the point that they are all close enough in strength in order to be able to kill one another if the circumstances match. For example, in the first battle, the circumstance was that Eve as I mentioned before, Eve damaged Conquest enough for Mark to finish him off. And in the second time, Mark held on to his throat and decided that I will hold on no matter what. And a lot of people might say, okay, cool, why didn't Conquest rip off Mark's arms? The difference in strength is not at a level where he's able to rip off his arms. It's not that great. He is stronger than Mark, though. He definitely is stronger than Mark. Now let's move on to Nolan. I think it's safe to say during this fight that Nolan is weaker than Conquest. He's physically weaker. And again, Conquest, even though he messes around with Mark, I don't think he messes around when it comes to a warrior and a known warrior like Nolan. As we can see it here, the fast turnaround that he had on Nolan just proves that. I would say this version of Conquest is stronger than this version of Nolan. However, if we fast forward, we know that later on, Nolan is able to take on Thrag. And this is where the importance of experience comes in. One of the biggest misconceptions of Viltrumites is that they have a Zenkai boost, similar if not identical to Saiyans. This is a huge misconception in the Invincible community. And this basically comes from the Alan. Alan has a Zenkai boost. Alan, every time he is near death or he goes through like an insane battle and gets absolutely destroyed, he comes back stronger. The Viltrumites, however, do not go through that process. They get stronger through experience. One of their biggest weapons is the fact that they are able to live for thousands of years. This is their biggest weapon. They build strength over these thousands of years. They build experience. This is what makes them the warrior race that they are. And they fight. They just fight. You will gain experience and you'll become a better warrior as you fight. And here, Nolan takes on Thrag, and he basically is applauded by Thrag by being able to damage him. He's able to give Thrag a bloody nose. This is how strong Thrag was. He's able to give Thrag a bloody nose, and Thrag's response is, well done. In my absence, maybe you were the most qualified to lead. Thrag almost says this in a way which is like, you are second after me in terms of when it comes to Viltrumite strength. That's basically, that's the insinuation here. He then proceeds to go for his heart, and then Nolan is smart enough and fast enough to move out the way, and Thrag says, impressive, moved at the last minute, protecting your heart. So not only is Nolan an extremely strong Viltrumite at this point, he's also fast, agile, and mentally quick. This is why I would say that towards this part, towards the end of the comic, this version of Nolan would be able to handle Conquest. This is why power scaling is so complex. And I love the fact that the writers left this kind of ambiguous, because they didn't go out of their way to power scale Conquest and Omni-Man and even Invincible until later on. Krieg even, you know, they left that up to interpretation. The really high-end Viltrumites, other than Thrag, they could really take on each other. Again, it's circumstantial. It is really circumstantial.